Hey again everyone, it's Russ Gift back here for the second part of our tutorial video on making a splitter. Now today we are going to cover the input and output of our splitter so that we can attach a conveyor belt. So right now what we have is we have a cube that we can spawn in the world and that we can place on top of a conveyor belt. However, this cube currently doesn't do anything, so for today's quick tutorial we're going to have it so that we can go put an item in and have an item come out. Okay, so here we are back in our viewport for our build_tutorial splitter. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is add our conveyor input and our conveyor output. So I'm going to start by clicking on add component here and typing in factory. Okay, and then you'll see FG factory connection. So we're going to click that there, and we are going to call this input 1. Very important that we call this input 1 with a capital I. That will tell the buildable conveyor attachment blueprint that we are extending off of, that when you place on a conveyor belt, this is the input that you're going to attach to. Okay, now we're going to have it on the x-axis, so that's this red line here. Okay, so this is our input. We're going to have another one for our output. Okay, so the way that this works is, seeing as this is our input, we're going to have this on the left hand side here, and I'm going to line that up with the back of our wall. Now our arrow is currently pointing in towards the block. Our red arrow is pointing in towards the block. So that means that our conveyor belt is going to attach onto this red arrow and it's going to come out in the direction of the red arrow. We don't want that. We're attaching our conveyor belt on this side, so we need our red arrow to point this way. The way that we simply do that is by rotating the yaw value, which is the rotational z-axis, by 180 degrees. Okay, now you'll notice that the red arrow is pointing out, and I'm just going to line that with the back just like that. Perfect. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is put an output on our conveyor, so we're going to do FG factory connection again. Okay, and we're going to call this one output 1, and we're going to attach that there. Okay, then our output we are going to want to place on the other side of our cube. Okay, we just line that up, and that is not going to be rotated 180 degrees, so that points out. Okay, so now we have our two conveyor attachment points. I'm going to click compile and I'm going to click save, and now we need to do the logic, because right now these aren't going to do anything. Our input and our output, yes, they will connect to and attach themselves to a conveyor belt, but they will not do anything in game. There's two things we need to do. First of all, we need to tell the output that it's active. Okay, so before we do that, quick explanation. The way Satisfactory works is every factory tick, the outputs will fire. You need to tell Satisfactory which output needs to fire, but the outputs will fire and say, I need to place an item on the belt, and then you in logic using your blueprint will determine where the item comes from to place onto the belt. Okay, so with most games that I have modified, such as Minecraft for example, you push the item in and then you push the item out. In Satisfactory, you push the item out, and as you do so, you determine where that item comes from. Okay, so our input is going to be a conveyor, our input, and our clearance distance is 100. Okay, and we're not ticking M forward peek and grab to buildable. However, with our output, we need to set output in connection, and we need to tick M forward peek and grab to buildable. Okay, so that's done. Now this little tick here is going to say to the to the buildable conveyor attachment, right, that on factory tick, so every factory tick, you are going to try to push an item out of you, okay? And that's what this tick box here does for our output. It says on every factory tick, you are going to try and push an item out. Now, I'm going to compile and save again, and we're going to now jump into our event graph. Okay, so this is where we will write our code for our logic. Now, at the moment, we don't need to do anything in this part of the event graph. Instead, what we need to do is we need to add a custom grab function. Okay, to do this, from our event graph, we need to go into functions here, override, and on our override we need to select that we will be overriding the factory grab function. So let me just find the factory grab function. Factory grab. It will be on here somewhere. Bear with me. Factory grab output. There it is. Okay, so our factory grab output blueprint has two tiles: a return node and a start node. The start node contains two variables. The first one is going to be the connection. Okay, so this is going to be the output that's fired it. Okay, so in this event, the way we've currently got this set up, this function will only ever be called by output 1. Okay, so connection is always going to be output 1. Okay, type, well, nothing's going to be fired into type because at the moment we're just letting the factory handle type. Okay, the second, on the return node, we're going to have item out offset, and return values. So the out item is going to be the item that comes out of the conveyor. The offset is the position on the conveyor it's going to be when it comes out, and the return value is going to be whether or not the item came out or not. Okay, even if I set that to false and I have an out item, the item's still going to come out the other end. Okay, so we need to tell Satisfactory how to get that item. Now, right now we're not dealing with round robin. We're not bothering with multiple outputs. We're just doing one output, one input. Okay, so I'm going to break this connection here. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do is I need to detect whether the input, so whether this input is connected or not. Okay, so where I'm going to do that is I'm going to drag input 1 over to here. Okay, you see that we now have input 1 inside of our script. Okay, I'm going to drag out from the output of this tile, and I'm just going to type in is connected. Okay, so now we have this, which basically says is input 1 connected, and it's going to return a boolean. It's going to return true or false. Okay, I'm now going to add a branch. So this branch is going to determine which path of logic to follow based upon whether or not this boolean is true or false. Okay, so we're going to drag our start of our function over to the input there, and we're going to feed that boolean into our condition. Okay, so if it's false, we don't need to do anything. Okay, so we're going to leave false blank. If it's true, however, if the branch, like if the conveyor belt for the input 1 is connected, okay, then we're going to want to take an item off of our input belt. So the way we do that is I'm going to grab input 1 again, and I'm going to this time do factory grab output. Okay, so what this function here does, and notice it's got the same name as our override. Don't worry about that. We're not calling this. We are calling we're calling another function here. They're The function we're overriding has the same name, but it's a different function. Okay, I'm just going to link true to there. And this, what this does now is this will take an item off the input belt. Okay. Now you can filter what item is allowed to come out of the belt here. Right, we're not going to worry about putting a filter in. Okay, we don't need to tell it what type of item to get. We're going to leave that blank. Okay, and all we're going to do now is just pass our outputs from grab output to the return node. Okay, so we're going to just add a line of logic, link it up. So the item that comes out, when an item comes out of our input, so once we've taken an item off our input conveyor, we're going to pass it to the return node. So that's going to go to our output conveyor. Okay. Now, one thing to point out is this function here will always grab an item off the conveyor belt of input 1 when it's called if there's an item available on input 1. Okay. So I'm just going to link the offset and the return value out. Okay, the return value is going to be whether or not an item was passed through. Our out item is the item that was passed, and the offset is the distance from the input conveyor to the factory. Okay, and that's it. Now, one thing that I will mention is, yes, output 1, because we've ticked that the box that we ticked earlier. This output will always call this function every factory tick. Only, however, when the output is A, connected, and B, isn't full. Okay, so if the output conveyor is full, this function will not get called. If the output conveyor is not connected to the output, this function will not be called. Okay, in all other circumstances, this function will be called. Okay, so I'm going to click compile and save. Okay, so once again, if the input conveyor is connected, then we're going to grab an item off the input conveyor, and we're going to pass it out of our output conveyor. Okay, so that's that. Now, another thing is, in the previous video, you noticed that our icons had disappeared. Well, what I've done is I've put a PNG file into my buildables folder here, which is my icon, and I've set the icon to that. Okay, so the reason it didn't work last time is because that example icon that comes with the mod setup isn't included in our build path. It isn't inside our tutorial splitter folder, but now I've put an icon in our tutorial splitter folder, and I've linked that into the milestone and into the description. Okay, so you can see that that has been selected there. This is just a PNG file with a transparent background, and the same with our schematic. You can see I've put that there. Okay, so we are going to alpac this now by clicking the alpac button, and in the last video you didn't get to see the alpac button, so I'll just drag this window out and it's right there. Okay, so I'm going to click alpac, and that is going to start cooking our mod. And what I'm going to do is I will be back once this is finished compiling, and once we are loaded into a new game in Satisfactory to take a look at our current progress. Okay, I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we are loaded into Satisfactory now, and we're going to test the mod. So the first thing we need to do is go to the hub, and you'll notice that because I've now got the icon set up properly and it's within the tutorial folder, it actually now appears in game. So I can click that. I'm going to select the milestone and drop some goodies into it. There we go. Okay, so now we have our sorting splitter. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to pop down a conveyor. Actually, first of all, let me show you. So as you can see now, we've got a conveyor input and a conveyor output. That's what the arrows mean, if you well, you already know that. So we've got our input and output, and you can see, there we go. Conveyor can go in one end, the conveyor can, there we go. Okay, so if I then put down a storage unit, let's put a storage unit down. What is that thing doing? Oh, I've just unlocked something, haven't I? Of course it's going to be messing about. Okay, and let's put a belt going in and chuck some items on. You can see now that the items will go in because our output conveyor is asking for an item on the output. Right now, well, up until just, it wasn't getting any item, but now it is, and the item comes out. And because we've extended the conveyor attachment and we've set up our inputs with input 1 and input 2 as the names, we should be able to place it on the conveyor belt in just the same way. So you see, as I hover on the conveyor belt, place that down, and it's automatically attached. So if once again I put down a storage container here, and I link up the conveyor belt and grab some items to put through the conveyor. So let's just grab some stuffs. There we go. And if we pop all of that in, you should see that the conveyor belt will be linked after placing it on the conveyor. And there we go. Excellent. Okay, right, in the next video I will show you how we we'll add all 3 outputs and make it round robin with some logic. So the next video is going to be pretty blueprint intensive, but yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!